welcome back to Neurodiverse Christian Couples. I'm one of your hosts, Stephanie.
That makes me the other host, Danny.
Danny, you've never done Danny before.
Well, you've never done Danny.
I don't know. Something came over me. I was like, what are we going to say? I'm Stephanie. I'm Dan. I don't know. We're doing social communication today. So I don't know. Maybe
that makes us go all high pitched.
I don't know. So we have been doing a little series based on Uniquely Us, Gracefully Navigating the Maze of Neurodiverse Marriage, where Dan reacts to the chapters.
That's our new book, by the way.
Yes, well, we're going to get there.
Well, you said what we were going to do, and then you just threw out this title.
Okay, well, I was getting ready to say the book that we wrote together, that Dan co-wrote with me, the first 5 chapters, and then I think 1 or 2 chapters in the back, but did not read the rest of the book before it was published. So after he read it, he was like, hey, we have a pretty good book. So we thought we'd kind of go chapter by chapter and discuss some of the things, because some of the terminology is new for you. Like when we did executive function, you came away with a different understanding of executive function. So today is social communication. So I guess what first do you want to react to or discuss?
That sounds like a tautology.
Okay.
Communication is always about talking to someone.
Okay, and you're going to have to talk louder. The people are saying you don't talk loud enough. So
maybe the people could hear better.
Yeah, thanks. I get all the emails about how the sound quality isn't good. So please talk to the microphone.
Started to talk on the little pedal mics.
All right, what do you want to discuss today?
Well, I guess there's a lot of different ways that social communication could be interpreted, right? Lots of it could be who you're socializing with. That's probably the biggest thing is you talk different to a coworker than you do maybe your kids or your spouse or your mom, dad.
Turning up your volume.
I don't know what you want me to do. I'm not going to shout. And I guess each of those audiences, you talk differently. You might use a different vocabulary.
I guess
you might also have more than just verbal communication going on. There's body language and expression and tone and volume. And
are you good at distinguishing those things?
All of those things?
Mm-hmm. Body language, tone.
No, not usually. It's easier when the subject matter is narrow.
So we kind of talked a little bit about that on the executive function one, that the differences in doing certain things at work and getting them done, because it's a context with rules and protocols and a boss and deadlines, and it's a different context at home. I guess I'm interested, because we haven't really talked about this before jumping on the podcast, which sometimes we do. What was your understanding of social communication or social language pragmatics before you read the book? And then what did you learn, or what was different after you read Carol's chapter?
Yes, I learned all of the words that go into it. I don't know if I can remember them all, like phonology and semantics and pragmatics. There was 2 more that I can't remember.
Syntax is one.
Syntax.
Morphology. There's one short than M, I think. Anyway.
And so I guess I knew that intrinsically. I guess I just didn't have a name for them. It was interesting that when she pulled apart which ones are spectrum folks tend to struggle with, it was semantics and syntax. And it was interesting. I was reading that, and I remember thinking through syntax. Sometimes there's another story that goes along with phonology, but I can be very interested in where a comma is or isn't in a word.
Oh my gosh, he is totally a grammar Nazi.
Because you can change an entire sentence meaning on the location of a comma. So that's important. And then I can get, the arrangement of adjectives can be important.
And something you did that was extremely annoying when we were dating and early married is correcting my grammar. I did not.
You're making sure I was understanding what you're saying.
No, you're constantly correcting my grammar.
Maybe. Sometimes I'll I have an interest in languages anyway. Understanding why some languages, like we stress certain parts of a word. How come when we say, I don't know if I can pull um, I'll pick out a random word. I don't know where this word came from. Frenetic. You kind of get a stress on the middle of the word, but you also parse the word in certain ways. Frenetic. Why isn't it frenetic? Right? It's just that kind of weirdness. And sometimes I can be in conversation and get stuck on a word and think, I wonder how many ways you could pull that word apart, and then get stuck behind. And, somebody else is talking and I've really just dissected a word the whole
You're like
time.
Francisco,
Yeah.
Francisco. That's a fun word. What I can't remember. You had told me. Did you read the encyclopedia or the dictionary when you were younger?
Both. I actually
You read
said
both.
dictionary.
Okay.
I had a dictionary that we read that would read. There was only one me that I read. My parents got one. I don't remember. I was elementary school, something like that, and that was fun. And then we had I can still remember the cover. It was a big dictionary. It's probably 3 inches thick, and it had a paper cover on the outside of sleeve, and it was Webster's Dictionary and Thesaurus, and that was fun. So sometimes I'd read those. And the encyclopedia came with a update every year, because you can only sell encyclopedia once. So they gave you a reason to buy their update. And it was a yearly, I don't remember what the title of it was, but it was Encyclopedia Britannica this year or whatever it was. It had a number. And I read that one every time I came in. We didn't get that for very long, but I read that too.
So you've always had an interest in words, the spoken language, also etymology.
Yes.
And not just of the English language, but other languages. So Dr. Hans Asperger, when he named the syndrome that he found to be part of the autism spectrum, he actually called it the little professor syndrome. Because he found that those who he was calling high functioning autism before it became Asperger's and then became autism spectrum again, that those on the spectrum had a kind of wanting to learn, since you knew a lot of words, could had a high vocabulary, but didn't always know how to use language socially or relationally or to make it useful in relational context.
Or where, be able to pull a good word in the right situation.
Yes.
Right. Sometimes the word choice could be too big, too, like people walk away. Nobody uses that word that way.
I know we're trying to bring keen back into the language because we both decided we liked that word.
Yep. And right on.
No, we're not doing right on.
Right on.
No. That Texas guy, he does that. That's his thing. But our Aussie and Brit clients, they say keen a lot, and I really like that. I think we should bring keen back. Join the fight to bring keen back into the American English vocabulary.
Keen and right on.
No, that's the 70s. So back to the chapter. So you learned some of the definitions, which I'm sure was interesting to you because you liked how things are defined. You saw that there are specific parts of language that those on the spectrum can struggle with. What else was memorable or notable for you?
Just some of Carol and Greg's interactions. I thought that was relatable.
Yes, and we're going to have Carol and Greg on. I told them I'm going to have them read some of their parts because I thought that would be interesting. Yeah, I can see them. I can see them having this conversation. Can you? Yes. I can see it in my head.
The one that was probably the most like was actually, I think, one of the first interactions they put in. It was to the effect of Carol said it was hot or cold. I can't remember which one.
It's hot.
And Greg effectively just said, okay.
Right. I found that one. That's on page 125. Carol says, gosh, it's hot in here. We really should open up the house. Greg does nothing, even though he is sitting right next to the door. Carol opens up the house while walking around him and says, why didn't you help me open the house? Greg says, I didn't know you wanted me to do it now.
Or at all. There was no ask or question in there. It was a statement of fact. And so she made an announcement or a statement of fact, and that was an easy one to relate to. There was no ask Oh, so should we do something about that, or do you enjoy being hot?
So we in the neurotypical world would say there was an inference there. There is a statement that it is hot. One person begins opening the house. There would be an inference. There would be an implication that you could help me open the house. And we were having a conversation with Erica. So our youngest daughter was a TESOL major. She's now an English language learner teacher. And we were having this conversation. We were walking and he kept interrupting her to ask questions. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, Dad, just infer, use the pronoun from the previous sentence."
I hate pronouns.
They stump you all the time.
And they're as bad as faces.
But she was explaining how when she is teaching the English language to her English language learners in the public school setting, or when she was working with adults, that she has to go into all the nuances of using certain words, like you said, how to inflect, when not to inflect, what's casual language, what's business language. And then the English language has got a lot of goofy things about it anyway. And so those same things, she was having the conversation. She's like, these are the same things when she was learning about linguistics and in some of her special ed classes, that these are the same nuances that the autistic students could struggle with. So in one of the classes I was doing today, one of the ladies said, "How do we answer people who say, 'Oh, my husband does that. All men do that. This is just a man thing'?" And there's a really great explanation that Carol gives in the book. I'll give you a little bit of the rundown. It's not just that guys on the spectrum do this and neurotypical men don't. It comes down to three things: frequency, intensity, and duration. Because of that lack of generalizability, I mean, we've been married almost 30 years. We've had discussions about pronouns, discussions about inferences, and Dan has not improved in that area.
That's not true. Might be some.
No. So it's not just that autistic guys do things neurotypical guys don't. There's usually not a generalizable, we have the discussion and now generalize it into the use next time we have that argument. The frequency is more often, the duration is more often, and the intensity that things can escalate over what could be a harmless question or feel like a harmless question or statement can turn into something that in most situations, like where's the phone charger or can you pick up the milk, usually does not start fights.
Yes, I can pick up the milk.
There you go. See, he can do it. That doesn't mean he will.
You said can.
I know. That's one of those fun things. What else? So you learned some of the definitions of the words. You learned maybe where some folks on the spectrum can struggle. You saw Carol and Greg's interactions. What else was something that stuck out to you?
There was one interaction they had where there was a giant leap in what seemed like what they were talking about. Like one person had a significant internal dialogue going on and just skipped a large portion that was helpful context for the other individual. And that's I don't know where that lives on where you are on spectrum or not, but it's just true. You got to help the other person. If you started here and then rabbit trailed 6 times and then took a train, you got to maybe lead the other person into where you are, because they're not going to get there, especially if that other person is on the spectrum. I mean, there was Greg's talking. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're saying.
It's that idea of if you leap too much, you're gonna lose them. And sometimes you don't have to leap a lot. You just have to. We were in the. It was yesterday, I think. We were having a conversation in the kitchen, and I still thought we were on the topic that was 10 seconds old, and you switched to something else because I was still on the prior conversation.
That train had left the station and was moving on.
And you'd moved on to something new, and I was lost.
Right. So for a few seconds, I was like, wait, who did that? Why did she say that? Why is that? And it's like, oh, no, we've switched. So when I went back to school, I am not an SLP. I am not with speech language pragmatics or speech language pathologists, right? But they work with speech language pragmatics. I saw in my couples, the biggest thing they were struggling with was communication. So when I went back to school, when I was working on my doctorate, I got the concentration in conflict resolution, mediation, negotiation, and communication skills, because just there's so many different ways from, as you said, the words used, how it's said, when it's said, the context and when it's said, the volume, the tone, the frequency, the prosody, all of those things. And there's just so many different places but in a neurodiverse couple that can go awry. So it can cause conflict, it can cause misunderstanding, it can cause one to feel falsely accused. But sometimes there is, and the neurotypical way of speaking, we are relying on some inferences. We have an expectation that if we talked about this about an hour ago, let's just say an hour ago, not a day ago, that we were talking about something an hour ago and now we're talking about it again, that we want to bring that in, kind of like the Bible when you're reading a verse, bring in the previous chapter.
I'm not good at that.
In the book, don't just start at 5. Let's bring in the whole thing. And because your brain and the autistic brain tends to isolate on the topic or the thing now and doesn't bring in topics or bring in that other conversation that is part of the same web of conversation. It's like a whole new topic for you sometimes, and that it's exhausting for me and confusing for you.
Right.
What else? What other things? You're supposed to be reacting and learning. I read the book and I helped edit it, so I don't want to just keep talking because I already did it.
You're expecting me to have the book memorized. A couple of points that were made: humor, dry.
You've always liked British and dry, honey.
And
which I guess that makes sense why many people on the spectrum like puns and wordplay type of humor or stand up or witty because of the play and use of words. I guess that makes sense.
And along with that just deadpanned delivery, right? The most outrageous something or other delivered with a very deadpan kind of flat affect.
That's funny.
It's contrary to what, right? You get the big contrast there of something big being said, but being said in a way.
So you recognize that in humor, but not so much in.
Well, because it's usually a show that says this is funny, right? It's called a comedy.
Because it's a comedy. It's like, oh, laugh now.
Right.
Okay.
What are some other things? We talked about, we didn't talk about listening, because you have to be a good listener too in communication. That one takes practice. I mentioned earlier that sometimes just parsing a sentence can be a struggle. So if you can quickly get behind. Like, so you say something, and this happens still frequently is, well, the other thing that happens frequently is you don't say my name first. And so I'm 3 sentences behind before I started listening. And so we have to start over before I'll start listening.
Right, which is interesting because we both have said that those salespeople that say your name all the time, that is super annoying. Like, Stephanie, it's glad to see you today. Stephanie, I'm so glad you're here. What would you like to get for you to get to drink, Stephanie? That annoys the fire out of me. I can't stand it.
But to say your name first.
I know, but so
attention.
We kind of had this thing so it was like, Danny, eyes on me. That's what I have to do. Danny, eyes on me.
So that way I don't get like 3 sentences in and say, I just started listening. We need to start over.
Yes, that's happened on many occasions.
But then after that, so then we start listening, or I start listening, and now sentence 3 comes around and I'm still parsing sentence 1 or 2. And, now I'm already behind. The other side of that is maybe I parsed sentence 1 and 2, but I found alternate ways to hear it. Now I'm figuring out which one of those is the most right one. So that can be that can be challenging because now you're constantly looking forward and backwards, trying to figure out of all the things that have been said, which one of those possible meanings is the most cohesive, and then really hoping you're right.
Well, I've learned to prompt you when I want you just to hear me vent, if I want you to problem solve, or if I'm seeking other information, because I think the AS brain naturally starts listening like a lawyer, looking for faults, inaccuracies, cross-examination, instead of actually listening to understand what the person is saying first before you start making judgments or offering advice. Like, listen to the whole thing and see what the person is seeking. I'm venting about something that happened in the grocery store, or something's happened with one of our kids that I want to talk with you about, or is there a problem to solve with a time sensitive deadline? Those are all different types of conversations. So sometimes I do. I guess now I'm going to have to remember even more to state your name, because like you're not aware that the blonde person in the room is talking, even though there's two of us, because we're
You walk
empty
around
nesters.
talking to your phone all the time. I don't know if you're talking to me or talking to the widget.
Okay, so I could be on Vox or Marco Polo. I get that, but
or upstairs mumbling to anybody, and
mumbling to anybody.
Somehow I think you're supposed to be talking to me, and I don't know.
But so there's not a social context that's coming down into the room where
Sometimes
you are.
You just start talking and then walk up the stairs.
Oh, I know other people are feeling my pain right now.
I don't know if I'm supposed to follow you around to know, is this a conversation that I'm a part of, or if I just stay here, she thinks I'm super here, or it's not easy.
Yeah, so we're still a work in progress. We laugh a lot more than getting frustrated and angry.
Yes.
We realize that's just the way our brains work. And then right now, this brain fog weird thing phase that I'm in, who knows? I can forget my own name. And everything is a whatchamacallit thingamajiggy. What's a who's it? I'm losing words at the moment.
That's keen.
That is not keen. I do not find that keen.